Welcome to the first episode of Charting Change in Legal of 2025. I'm Ari Kaplan, an analyst who covers the legal industry, and I am lucky to be here today with my colleague.
Caroline Hill. Hi, it's Caroline. I'm the editor at Legal IT Insider. Ari, so great to be here. 2025.
I know, wonderful. For some reason, though, we're a few days into the year and I already feel behind. And I wonder how many people, it's not even as if I feel like I'm not going to achieve my resolutions, which you don't accept for another week, according to statistics, but I do feel sort of behind. Like I have so many things I'm trying to take care of, and I think we all tend to front load the year because
Yeah.
then it sets the tone. So we want to set a really good tone for the year, but the truth is it's all about pacing, isn't it?
Do you know what I'm focusing on? Like you and I've talked a lot because you're very good about not leaving it to the end of the year to come up with your plans for next year, which I took on board actually. So around November, you start to pre-plan, which is a really good idea because there's so much pressure on the start of the year otherwise. But what I have been focusing on is I had some headspace over Christmas. And one of the things I spent some time doing, other than doing nothing, is focusing on my environment and taking some time to just take time. One thing that I did in December, particularly, and but throughout the year, was run 100 miles an hour and take no time to actually step back and go, okay, am I being effective? And is my workspace conducive to being really productive? I work from home a lot of the time. Is my home looking in a way that when I walk out, I don't feel like I've, got a complete clutter in my head. And actually, that's something that, whether this lasts, let's revisit. This could be like one of those gym resolutions. But I've been focusing every single day on restoring my office to look the way that it needs to. And I've decided to take some time out every Friday afternoon, carve out strict time to have some admin time and to go, right, am I working productively? What could I have done differently? And try and, because otherwise, how do you maintain that headspace you get after a holiday where you've had some time out? That's my big question, I suppose.
I encourage people to particularly the people who aren't billing their time, although I know we have a vast number of listeners who bill. I don't actually bill time, but I track my time. And I think that you're saying something that resonates with me because I try to pay attention to how much time I'm spending. It doesn't have to be, it's not an exact science for what I'm doing. All right. If you're billing, it needs to be perfect and exact. For me, if I end up counting 45 minutes to something that only took 35 minutes because I didn't start the timer or I then didn't end it early enough, it's fine. But I think that that will kind of give you a sense of accomplishment. I saw a really interesting video actually on LinkedIn of someone talking about we always highlight the things we didn't do. We just have this great tendency to always emphasize the shortcomings of the day as opposed to what we accomplished. And I'm guessing that the clutter is kind of all part of that. But I agree with you. A workspace where you can focus is powerful. It just,
Yeah.
you know,
But it's the space as well. It's the headspace. It's like
yeah,
so
yep.
break, and I think this will resonate. Christmas is one of those times, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, but the festive period is one of those times when a lot of people are able to take their foot off the gas, which I don't think is applicable for much of the rest of the year. So it seems to be a collective time when people just take some time out. And it's just that case of, how do with 2025, we know it's going to be another crazy busy year, right? So Gen AI, we are going to be talking about it many, many times. Um, and it's really fun. It's super fun, but it's a case of for everybody, how do we work smart, not just be busy? Like the amount of times when I spoke to people last year, including I also was guilty of this, where people go, "How are you?" and you just go, "Busy," right? You just that's all you've got to say. How are you? Busy, and it's like, okay, sure, but everyone's busy, right? We're all busy, but are we being smart busy? You think about this a lot. You're one of the smartest people about this. Your timer thing is amazing, given that you don't charge time. I've always thought about bringing in a timer, but although I have started to bring in um, a more disciplined way of working in terms of 25-minute bursts. So that's been quite
Yep.
helpful. But yeah, it's just like, how do you be smart busy? And how do we maintain smart busy through the year when rather than just always being like, yeah, I've just got so much to do, I'm so busy. Like, yeah, that's a given.
It's also the idea of giving yourself as much automation. So, on the just to continue with this tracking thing, for a while I wasn't as good about tracking because it required me to proactively start a timer, write a description. But then I actually integrated it with my calendar. And so now it auto populates a task. So it is running now without me having started it to say, charting change in legal episode with Caroline Hill. And if we end 5 minutes later or we started early or however the time works out, it has like a defined block. So then when I look back on the day, I know that I've done 5 hours or whatever my calendar has already listed. And then I can go back and think, oh, I also spent some time following up here and doing this. And I think that that is really important. The other thing I'm gonna try to do is not treat the weekend like a day of the week. Debbie Foster at Affinity Consulting says, when I'll paraphrase, but something like when you're working on the weekend, you're essentially cheating yourself. And when you leave something for the weekend, because as an entrepreneur, I mean, I'm sure you tend to think, you know what, I'll have time to think and do on the weekend. I won't have any calls. I won't have to as many emails. So I'll leave this to then when I can. And that's a mistake. It unless it's a creative pursuit, you're writing a short story or teaching yourself a language or playing an instrument or whatever you think something that's not work happens to be. I guess it could be producing something if you don't consider it work. But the idea of the weekend, I think, is also an issue.
So I have to say I'm pretty normally it varies. December just went nuts, which is I think is why I'm thinking about this particularly now. I suppose like a lot of people, the end of the year it gets crazy, and there was no delineation between night, morning, weekends. It just all went. But normally I'm pretty good about that. I work from home, as I said, but I normally do. I'm able to just walk away at the weekend unless they've got so many deadlines coming out of my ears, and I need that break. I really need. I know I need to have that time. I think obviously I've got two kids who are still at home, who are teenagers, so they want to spend less and less time with me. But I try and spend time with them, and get out in the fresh air and do exercise. And so I think actually generally I'm pretty good about that. I'm probably bad about on my weekends, perhaps watching a little bit of Netflix. I'm debating whether that's a good way to spend my time and also need to be more disciplined about social media. I think this year that's another objective. Maybe don't get caught up with the stupid reels that I've started watching, which are a complete waste of time. um, but yeah, it's we've been reflecting for a while now, haven't we, on what we want to achieve. And I'm excited about this year. I just think we need to just keep everything in mind before it takes over. I think that it's a case of make sure that we're in control, not the agenda. And we've got so much fun stuff coming up. I'm going to be in New York in March, which is going to be awesome. And we're already planning some stuff around that. Like we're actually doing an event ourselves at New York, which I'll bring you the exclusive when that's confirmed. So yeah, it's going to be some. I think we're going to have some fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations already with leaders in our space and also follow-ups to conversations I had in December. And I think there's a really exciting sense of optimism. I get the impression that people are building on something positive from last year, and there's momentum in our space. And everyone always says, "Oh, this is going to be a big year for technology. It's going to be." I can't remember a year where someone didn't say that. So whenever I read these predictions, and there have been a lot of them in a lot of different areas, they tend to resonate with a lot of similar sentiments. It's going to be an exciting year, this, and then they throw in an example of something, and then there's like, but there's some uncertainty. So I
Yeah.
think you can just sort of use that formula for absolutely anything we're going to talk about for the whole year. It's going to be exciting. It could be really impactful, but it's uncertain and I'm not sure. And if you don't get buy-in and you don't get adoption, then, and a budget, of course, then boy, this could, and then you can just apply that in-house to a law, to a paralegal, to e-discovery, to AI. And I just think that's the exciting part. That's why we get to do what we do. And it's been a lot of fun. And I've really been trying to think of like where if there's anything I think that is kind of universal for us all, is sort of where can we provide more value, both from our in personal networks and it also as a professional. And I think that theme has also been resonating. I hope that continues because I know that that can fall away as people get busier or as the road that they think they're on happens to take a really strong turn somewhere in a direction that people didn't anticipate, can we continue to infuse that level of humanity and thoughtfulness? We'll see.
I think on the what people expect for the year, yeah, I think you're right. We're always going to go, oh, big year. But in my end of 2024 conversations, which I did on video this year, a lot of them, I thought that'd be more fun than, just quick 5, 10, 5, 10, 15 minute interviews. And there was a lot of focus on this is going to be the year. Obviously, Gen AI was a
Mhm.
big part of the conversation, and there was a lot of, and they said, 2024 has been a year of experimentation, of thought to us, and to a certain extent, still some panic. But they thought that this is going to be the year when things start to move more into production. And that was both in private practice. And I spoke to Mike Haven, who has moved to Meta, which is really exciting. Obviously, he was at Intel. Um, and so from an in-house perspective and from private practice, the firms that he's working with, where they've been working in a sandbox on Gen AI projects and expect those to come to fruition this year. So I think although I agree, we always do say, oh, it's going to be a big year. I think this year is going to be exciting from that sense. And I think also the firms are going to have to think very closely, excuse me, about culturally what that means. So Thomson Reuters just came out with a big report talking about the impact that Gen AI is going to have on firms and how they really need to start thinking, if they haven't done before, not just about how they're going to be using the technology, but really what that means in terms of the culture of the firm going forward.
I agree that it will be more tactile somehow. Instead of watching, we will actually be sort of kneading the dough, if you will, or, kind of molding the clay. I think I certainly went through that a lot over the last few months of the year where I was proactively sharing how I have experimented with different tools. And I think that is one of my favorite topics of conversation is sort of just how are you doing that? What's worked for you? What has not worked for you? In a lot of things, in relationships with people, in athletics, in parenting, although I feel like we all live in a glass house as parents. So that one you got to take with a grain of salt. But for everything else, with generative AI and also I think it's just so important, and I feel like people will increasingly realize this, but there's obviously a sense of fear that you will miss out if you do not rush into some generative AI application and transform your firm. But you can probably achieve a much greater sense of transformation by focusing on data hygiene or organization or knowledge management before you jump right into some aspect of technology that will then need to rely on a flawed system. That's really a realization that people may have come to at the end of last year. Maybe they'll start thinking about it this year. There will be clear transformation. The question is generative AI going to be the catalyst for that transformation, or is it going to be the driver of that transformation? And I think for a lot of organization, it will be a catalyst that gets them thinking about what they will need to do in order to take advantage of it, as opposed to just throw it in, lop it on, you- and 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 have good luck. And then you see a lot of use cases, and those people that are sharing use cases have gone through this process. But I don't know that there's enough attention being paid to the prep that they went through to showcase what an extraordinary experience they've had. And people really need to be thoughtful about that because that's going to yield success, right? The solid foundation is what people need more than this surface level excitement and flashy tool.
Yeah, so true, so true. I did in my last Orange Rag newsletter of the year, I spoke to Yvonne Dornio from Essentio, and they shared they're advising people going forward on these 4 points that people absolutely have to pay attention to. And data hygiene is one of them. And Yvonne was telling me that so many companies or organizations, firms have been experimenting with Gen AI and then they hit a wall because they don't have all of their blocks in place. And one of those is training. There's so many things you can have a look at on legaltechnology.com as at the newsletter. She's so helpful, and she was saying that you really need to have, you know, all of your ducks in a row. But actually that's part of the whole experimentation process, right? Like this is a learning process for everybody. And so they've been, you've had the front runners and you've had the people that are the careful followers, and then you've got the kind of slightly aghast trailers. But they're all going to have to learn exactly what you said, which is that you have to have, you have to be focusing on data management, data hygiene, on training your people, and getting all your blocks in place 100%. Otherwise you're going to go for, 3 steps forward, probably 3 steps back. But or maybe perhaps less, but maybe not 3 steps. You're always going to be learning and evolving and growing, and this is important part of the process. But in order to really succeed, I completely agree with you. That's good that there's been a lot of learning over the past year about what it needs to be successful.
And I anticipate a shift from, in some ways, we were seeing stars show us what their talent has produced at the highest level, at the most prestigious law firms. It's as if someone was out there and giving you their training program for running, a 3-hour marathon. And this year we'll see people who've never run a 5K before who will show you how they did it, how they'd never run before, their very modest training program, and all of a sudden they were able to succeed. And so you will be able to see as a model more firms and more teams with limited resources who are able to accomplish something pretty meaningful as
Yeah.
opposed to constantly seeing examples. And those people are remarkable. I'm not in any way discounting the
Mm.
leadership that they've shown in our space, but you're seeing lots of the same stories of firms with great resources and incredible talent and the ability to navigate a very complex technology landscape show us something that isn't necessarily accessible to a lot of people. But
Yeah.
this year, my sense is that that will become more accessible. The technology providers will democratize some of the tools that they offer. And also, there's been a lot of great knowledge sharing around the world. So that's another thing that is really great. You may see a tool that was developed in Australia or somewhere in Eastern Europe or in South America, and people will realize, oh, we might be able to adopt that, or that might be really helpful. And so you're starting to see people shine a light on areas and developers and just startups that are doing great things that can really benefit folks who need some of those tools designed in different ways.
Yeah. I hope for people. I was speaking to an IT director yesterday, and there's a lot of obviously all of this takes money, right? These projects take money, and this is an issue that is coming across still strongly for firms, in terms of where's the budget going to come from. And one of the things that I'm picking up is, there's a lot of flux still in terms of core systems, right? So you've had out there sort of core systems to providers shifting, building really fast, like moving to the cloud, and firms are having to move with them. And there's implications in terms of just really bog standard day-to-day things that they need to do, where I really hope that there's focus among vendors on how to support their firms on really just taking care of the basics so that they can start to focus on these other things, because I feel like there's quite a lot of flux still in amongst systems that are required to function. And firms are finding themselves sometimes, really focusing still too much on really something that should be just sort of just day to day, because I feel for everybody because vendors are having to move because in the background. Before you even think about Gen AI, there's been the adoption of cloud technology, right? Which is still relatively new. And so people are having to run so fast and develop so fast, and there's so much flux. And you just think, you know what, that's what you really need is for vendors to support firms, I think, really, and work out how where they perhaps need support. I know that it's obviously a financial thing. They don't do this out of the goodness of their hearts. But speaking to firms, there's a lot of like questions still, just very practical questions around how are we going to do all of this stuff and have the budget to do all of that stuff, which is a real problem.
The one thing that I would recommend as someone that wrote a book called The Opportunity Maker is that in a period like this, where there are concerns about budget, there are concerns about ownership, there's concerns about adoption, there's selection issues, is to raise your hand and volunteer, be the liaison from your firm to your client to the vendor. It will require another meeting or 10. It will require a little bit more patience. It will require some accountability, but it will elevate your status in your organization. Again, wherever that organization is, it will just give you access to decision makers, to new applications that are emerging. I just think that there's a huge opportunity at every level, not just at the junior level, not just at for paralegals who tend to be very closely involved in some of this stuff, but for trial team leaders and for general counsel and for heads of legal operations. You mentioned Mike Haven, a great leader in our space, but these individuals don't become the leader in the space by accident. They are day in, day out, chipping away at learning and helping and thoughtfully trying to process a level of change that is complex. And so I highly encourage my peers and anybody who's listening to take ownership of something, like be the additional hand in the process, be willing to be on a committee, step into a meeting, take notes, which you don't even have to do anymore because the AI will do it. And so I just think that there's a really powerful opportunity that people aren't realizing, that in the midst of all of this chaos, there really is a chance to stand out if you often simply just raise your hand and say, I know this is complicated. I know this is going to take some time. I'm willing to be the person who interprets this for our team.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like great advice. Can I just finish before we do finish wrapping up on it? It's a shame that we're not on camera, that this is audio, because Ari's wearing a shirt which actually completely matches perfectly with his background wall.
Oh my gosh, yes, I blended in. Here you
You
go. I'm
literally blended.
I'm blending into the brick wall that you would have to see if we were on camera. I will put this Caroline's, I will put your link. You mentioned something earlier to something, so I will put that, and I will put this picture into the show notes for
Can we
our
please take
listeners.
a screenshot for you?
But I have to say that if you have listened to this program, there are no show notes, and that is a sophisticated level of podcasting that we have not achieved yet. However, we do have dialogue. It's powerful and it's
Yeah.
moving, and that's what we do here at Charting Change in Legal. So if you've listened in 2023 and then stayed for 2024, you should put your seatbelt on, because 2025 is going to be a ride of a lifetime in terms of where we're headed and where we've been. And I'm not sure about where we are, but big, big stuff coming, Caroline.
I actually can't wait, Ari. As I said on LinkedIn recently, it's a great time chatting with you anytime. And I learn a lot and it makes me think about things in a different way. And I'm grateful to you. And I can't wait to have more conversations in 2025. And it's great to be here for our very first chart and change in legal of 2025.
Right back at you, my friend. I'll look forward to seeing you at Legal Week in March, but having many, many conversations before then. Thank you, and
Thank
thanks
you,
to
Ari.
everyone for
Thanks,
listening. All
everyone.
right.
Bye.
Bye.